It's not a fun thing to do, but it's such an important HR process, and you need to do it right. In this episode, we're going to talk about terminations, how to handle them, how to do them right. Stay tuned, a lot to talk about in this episode of Down Payment.
Welcome to Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers. Prepare to learn something new about the industry that keeps us moving.
Check out all our podcast content on our social media channels. We are at Down Payment Podcast on YouTube, Down Payment Podcast on Instagram, and Down Payment Pod on X. Welcome back to the show. In this episode, we're going to talk about terminations. Terminations, they're not necessarily a pleasant thing to do, but they are such an important HR process. And unfortunately, in our industry, we see so many people do terminations wrong. I'm glad to have our special guest, Charles, back on the show. We're going to talk about how to do terminations right in this episode.
Hey, Ted.
Hey, welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, we've been talking about this as a topic, doing an episode on this for a while,
Yes.
because both of us have worked on this quite a few times in the past.
Yes. In my previous life, when I worked for the big bank or I worked for a Fortune 500 company, this was critical in our day-to-day production, in our day-to-day cycle of doing business, and that was terminations. And that's something that every business is going to have to deal with. And it's not difficult, but it's one of the hardest things you ever have to do.
Absolutely. And, it's one of those key processes, one of those key things that you need to be able to do in your business. And yet I've seen so many cases of it done poorly, done wrong, and it then hurt the business.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so talking
think-
about some best practices.
I think first and foremost, and this came from the big bank, was there should be no termination that's a surprise to anybody. If it's a performance related, I believe that word. If it's a performance based issue of why somebody's being terminated, then everybody should know what it is. The person being terminated, human resources, the managers, they should know exactly what it is. It shouldn't be a surprise. And if it is a surprise and it's performance based, you could be setting yourself up for litigation. And that's very difficult to deal with. Even if you win, there is a major cost to your company because of it. And that's why, you have the write-up process, you do the verbal, the written, the final, and then the termination. That's one way of doing it where everybody knows exactly what's happening. But you also have to make sure it's clear in every single step where that step is going to end. And in a lot of cases, if you do your job between the written and the verbal, between the verbal and the written and the final, people will find other jobs. You don't have to go through the process because they understand what's coming if things can't be corrected. The other part of that is when you start that process, a manager, a owner, everyone must be involved in the process of trying to help this person get better. Now, if somebody is stealing money, if somebody is doing things that are illegal, there may not be the process you go through because you have to eliminate those things quickly. But performance-based, you should always go through that step-by-step process to get to the end result.
And that step-by-step process is the disciplinary process.
Absolutely. You have the conversation. Then you give them a written warning. Then you can give them another written warning. And then you can give them a final, which says, if this doesn't improve, or the next time this occurs, you will be terminated. And you may not want to use you will be, you may want to use may, but the verbiage is important. But more important is the conversation you're having with that employee. Because we've all seen terminations. Well, I've seen terminations go really bad where somebody's going to fire somebody and then they want to litigate the whole thing. You spend all this time terminating somebody when it should be very short, quick, and to the point. If you have done everything correctly, holding everyone accountable for that process is critical in the success of making that termination very easy. The other part of that is it should be very, very, it should be very clean. There should be no emotion on our part, on the manager's part, on the employer's part, no emotion. Even though you know this person is having a struggle in their personal life or they have issues as kids, you have to think about your business and what this is doing to your business by them doing the things they're doing. That can make a problem. That can cause you a problem in the very end.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So you want to really approach it in a professional way. This is not the opportunity to settle scores. This is not the opportunity to have a final debate, a final argument. This is something you want done very professionally.
Absolutely.
And if someone on management side is emotional about it, is upset about it, that's someone that you don't want involved.
And if everybody is aware of what's going on, because you went through the process, you've had the discussions, you've done the training, you've done whatever it takes to get this person to win, what then happens is that when that time comes, they know it's going to come, so they're not going to be emotional. And that's the important part of it. You want to take emotion out of it. You may like someone. That's the challenge of managers becoming friends with people they work with, because it's very difficult to terminate a friend. You really have to put that separation between a manager and their staff about being friendly or being friends. Being friendly is one thing, being friends is another. Because that puts you even in a more awkward situation if that's your friend. And I can tell you, as one who had to do that, I made friends with someone, I had to terminate that person. I went to our HR director and said, hey, this is my friend, I can't do that. And she said, but it's your job. So what are you going to do? It's your job. So I had to go back upstairs, sit down and say, okay, well, this may end the friendship, but here we go. Taught me a very valuable lesson about being friendly versus being friends with people I work with.
No, that makes sense. And so much of the HR thing, if you will, is maintaining those clear professional boundaries and being a professional through all of the steps.
Absolutely. And we have a tendency sometimes to want to dance around certain issues. We don't want to have that honest, in-depth conversation about your performance because you're doing a good job, but there's some things you're doing that could get us in trouble financially, that could put our back against the wall, but you're doing a really good job. We have to have those hard conversations with people that work for us, or when it comes down to the time of termination, there is no it's a surprise. We never had the conversation. And it's like, oh my God, what do we do next? And in today's litigious society, they can call a liar on the back of a bus, and the liar can say, oh yeah, we can get paid. And when that happens, that then causes you even more issue. I think the other part of that is the termination process itself. The termination process should not be long and drawn out. The termination process should be very quick, very short, and very to the point, and we're done. Because at that point, there is no more arguing. There is no more justification. There is no more trying to make it right. What it is that we have came to a conclusion as we went through your written, your verbal, your final written, and your final, that these things are not improving. We cannot have this in our business. I wish you good luck, but we're going to separate our employment right now. That's all it needs to be. Because there is no but. There is none of that. It is short, sweet, and to the point, and it doesn't allow for the emotion and the gnashing of teeth and the screaming and the crying to take place, because we have been fair, we have been equitable, we have done everything that we as a company said we would do. Because I believe when you write people up, you should put some in there. Here's what needs to happen, and here's what your manager is willing to do. And you better make sure your manager does all of those, or they need to be held accountable.
Absolutely.
If we're going to do weekly checkups, I can't forget 1 week to do that checkup with you. If I'm on vacation, somebody else can do that checkup with you. But everything we put in there, we have to make sure that we do to make it clean, to get done with it, and to move on to bring someone else in to do the job. And the other part about termination is sometimes it's a favor. We have people we bring on that talk a good game. We think they're going to do a really good job. And when they come in, when they become part of the company, they just can't do it. It is not for them. I managed collections for a very long time. It seems to be very easy to call and pick up the phone and say, you owe me money, but not everybody can do it. And so you bring people in, they can't do it. They're failing. Your company's failing. And sometimes when you say, we just need to cut ties with this right now, it's a benefit to them that they can go find something else that's going to make their life better. Because we know it's horrible when you don't want to come to work in the morning because you're failing, you're not doing things you're supposed to do. And it's a challenge because as a manager, I hated to fail. And for every termination, if it was for something where people weren't trained correctly, that was my failure. Though it wasn't, it still was my failure.
Yeah, I could think of a couple times where we went to terminate someone and they said, "I can't believe it took you so long." Like they knew it was coming,
Yes.
and they were shocked it took us so long to come to this obvious conclusion.
Well, and that happens. That happens. That's just like when you write everybody up for everything, and they say, I got 16 write-ups and nothing ever happened to me. And by the time you terminate them, they go, I thought this was going to happen 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Because I have final. My performance has not been there. They do know. And most people do know upon termination, if you've done your job correctly, that it's coming. Now, there are those terminations that are going to happen because of here's what happened. It was you sexually harassed somebody. You did something that was horrible. And we're going to cut ties right now. We don't have to have a lot of conversation. We're just done. Those may get more emotional. Those may get more, but you're my friend and we've worked together for 5 years and I can't believe you're doing this to me. Yeah, well, what you did was so egregious. We have to move forward. Make sure in those cases, though, you've done a full investigation and you know exactly what has transpired if you're going to terminate that person. You're going to make sure you have investigated everything from every single angle to make sure you have a ground to stand on.
Absolutely. Well, any parting thoughts for our dealers on terminations?
Sure. You know what? Terminations are going to happen. There's no way to get around them. We just have to make sure that we're doing them correctly and we're protecting our brand and we're protecting our company. That would be my parting words.
Well, thank you, Charles, for coming on for another excellent episode. Now to our dealers, lots for you guys to unpack.
If you have any comments, please put them in the notes below. Would love to see what you think.
Absolutely. Now go sell some cars, everyone. Have a good day. Check out our podcast on all our social media channels. We are at Down Payment Podcast on YouTube, Down Payment Podcast on Instagram, and Down Payment Pod on X.
Thank you for listening. Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers, is a production of Meta Financial Services Incorporated.